Look, first of all, we're excited to be hosting our Global Investment Summit, and it's our Welcome to Business event. I'm also very pleased that, as you mentioned, we have secured commitments of almost £30 billion of investment. That's more than double, if not triple, what we had when we launched. And we're at a point now, given how people are feeling, given the amount that's being spent, where I think the priority has got to be lowering the tax burden. Right? Government's already spending a lot of people's money, and what we need to see going forward is more productivity. But what I have said is that this is the start of a journey. And I meant that when I said, look, after we got inflation down, I wanted to focus on making sure that we reward people's hard work, making sure that we grow the economy, and responsibly cutting. We're not fueling the inflationary fire. We're being sensible on public sector wage settlements, and actually you're seeing that feed through to the economy. And as I said, we're also improving labour supply. If I talk to businesses, what they're keen to see is access to labour. We're making sure that our labour market remains flexible, that we're moving people off welfare and into work. All of those things are contributing to, I think, downward momentum on inflation.
Prime Minister, if the OBR is actually right in their forecast, what does it mean where you can actually find some spending freeze or actually cuts?
Well, what we've just delivered are significant tax cuts. Significant tax cuts for business, significant tax cuts for everybody in work. Actually, government spending in the UK right now is at very high levels. Historically, over this Parliament, it's grown at very high levels, even in real terms after the impact of inflation. So I think any commentary or accusation that that's what's happening. And we're at a point now, given how people are feeling, given the amount that's being spent, where I think the priority has got to be lowering the tax burden. Right? Government's already spending a lot of people's money, and what we need to see going forward is more productivity out of the public sector. It needs to match what we've seen in the private sector post-COVID, and I'd rather focus on efficiency in the public sector and prioritise cutting people's taxes rather than the government spending ever more of their money. That's the point, I think, and I'm very clear that that is the choice that we are making.
But even if the voter doesn't necessarily feel that tax cuts because of inflation going up, so how much more can you cut taxes in April and beyond?
Well, it wouldn't be right to speculate on future events. We're just still digesting the one we've had, which, as I said, delivered the biggest tax cuts since any event since the 1980s.